The massive space station called Zenith Prime hung in the darkness like a small metal moon. Ships from 100 different worlds waited in long lines around it, each queue marked by glowing holographic signs that floated in the void. Some lines were for trade deals, others were for disputes between planets. And one particular line, marked with a green glow and a medical symbol, was for ships carrying aid and supplies to those who needed help. Captain Jake Morrison sat in his command chair aboard the UNS, defiant, and watched the other ships in the Humanitarian line through the main view screen. His ship didn't look like the others. The Defiant was a warship, plain and simple. Its hull was covered in armor plating. Weapon turrets stuck out from its sides like the spines of some mechanical beast. The engines were powerful enough to outrun most things in the galaxy, and the missile bays could hold enough firepower to crack a small moon. Lieutenant Amy Carter turned from her communications station, her face showing concern. "Captain, we're getting a lot of traffic on the open channels. The other ships are talking about us. What are they saying?" Jake asked, though he could guess. Amy touched her earpiece and listened. "Most of it is confusion. Some anger. A few ships are asking station control why a warship is in the Humanitarian queue." Commander Greg Palmer stood near the tactical display, his arms crossed. He was a tall man with gray at his temples and the look of someone who had seen plenty of combat. "They think we're trying to sneak weapons into the station." "We're not sneaking anything," Jake said calmly. "We filed all the proper paperwork. Our intentions are clear." "Clear to us," Greg said. "Not to them." Ambassador Lisa Bennett stepped onto the bridge from the corridor behind them. She was a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and the kind of presence that made people listen when she spoke. "Station Control just contacted me directly. The Vrexian Collective has filed a formal complaint. They're demanding we move to the military affairs queue or leave the area entirely." Jake wasn't surprised. The Vrexians were insect-like creatures who saw everything in black and white terms. A warship was for war. A medical ship was for medicine. The idea that something could be both seemed to bother them deeply. "What did you tell Station Control?" Jake asked. "I told them we're exactly where we need to be," Lisa said, "and that we're not moving." Amy's console beeped with an incoming transmission. "Captain, we're being hailed by the Caltharian Empire ship in the military queue. They're on the open channel. Put it on screen," Jake said. The view screen shifted to show the bridge of a Caltharian warship. The commander was a reptilian creature with scales that shimmered like bronze and eyes that were completely black. The Caltharians were warriors, and they wore that identity like armor. "Human vessel," the Caltharian commander said, his voice deep and slightly amused. "Are your navigation systems damaged? The military queue is 3 kilometers to your starboard side. Perhaps your species has trouble reading basic signs." Greg tensed, but Jake held up a hand. "Our navigation systems work perfectly, Commander. We're in the correct queue for our mission." The Caltharian tilted his head, an expression that might have been confusion or mockery. "You carry enough weapons to level a city. Your armor could withstand a sustained bombardment, yet you wait with the medicine carriers and food transporters?" "That's correct," Jake said simply. "Fascinating," the Caltharian said, though his tone suggested he found it more amusing than fascinating. "Perhaps humans are even stranger than the report suggested." The transmission ended. Lisa moved to stand beside Jake's chair. "This is going to get complicated." "It already is complicated," Jake replied. He looked at the ships around them through the view screen. Most were small vessels with medical symbols painted on their hulls. Some had transparent sections where you could see supplies stacked inside. They looked peaceful, helpless even. The Defiant looked like it could destroy all of them without breaking a sweat. Amy's console lit up again. "Captain, Station Control is requesting we hold position. The Galactic Council wants to speak with us before we're allowed to dock." "Of course they do," Greg muttered. Jake stood from his chair and straightened his uniform. "Amy, open a channel to the council chambers." "Lisa, you're with me." "Greg, you have the bridge." "Understood," Greg said, moving to take the captain's chair. Jake and Lisa walked to the communications room, a smaller space just off the bridge with better equipment for diplomatic conversations. Amy routed the connection through, and soon the view screen showed the council chambers at the heart of Zenith Prime. The Galactic Council consisted of representatives from dozens of species. They sat in a circular arrangement, each on a platform that could adjust to their particular biology. At the center of the circle was Counselor Thexal, a Vrexian whose mandibles clicked together as he spoke. "Captain Morrison," Thexall said, his voice coming through the translator with a buzzing quality. "Your presence in the humanitarian queue has caused considerable disruption. Several member species have expressed concern about a warship approaching the station under the guise of peaceful intentions." "There's no guise, Counselor," Jake said. "We're here for exactly the reason stated in our documentation. The Defiant is responding to a request for disaster relief supplies and medical personnel." "Your vessel is a warship," another counselor said. This one was from a species that looked like floating jellyfish, her voice high and musical. "Warships do not perform humanitarian missions." "Human warships do," Lisa said, stepping forward. "Perhaps that's the source of the confusion. Our military philosophy is different from most species in the galaxy." Thexall's mandibles clicked faster, a sign of agitation. "A warship is an instrument of destruction. Its purpose is to wage war, to kill, to destroy enemy vessels and installations. This is understood across all civilized species." "With respect, Counselor," Jake said, "that's not how humanity sees it." "Then explain," Thexall demanded. "Explain why a vessel bristling with weapons believes it belongs in a line with medical ships." Jake took a breath. This was the moment he'd known was coming ever since they'd entered the system. The Defiant carries 48 guns of various sizes. We have missile batteries, point defense systems, and enough armor to take hits from almost anything. But we also carry medical facilities that can treat 500 patients simultaneously. We have engineering equipment that can rebuild infrastructure. We have supplies to feed 10,000 people for 3 months. We have Marines who are trained in combat, yes, but also in search and rescue, disaster response, and emergency medical treatment. You describe a ship with split purposes, the jellyfish counselor said. That seems inefficient. We describe a ship that can protect lives and save them, Lisa added. Counselor, 3 weeks ago the Defiant was the nearest vessel to a Terran colony that suffered a major earthquake. Within 4 hours of arriving, our crew had pulled 200 people from collapsed buildings, established field hospitals, and begun restoring power to critical facilities. Would you have preferred we sat by and waited for a medical ship to arrive 3 days later? Thexall was silent for a moment. Then he spoke, his voice colder. I would prefer that your species maintain proper distinctions between military and civilian functions. What you describe sounds like an attempt to make warfare seem noble by wrapping it in humanitarian clothing. Jake felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his voice level. Counselor, I've commanded the Defiant for 4 years. In that time, we've engaged in combat twice. We've conducted humanitarian missions 17 times. Our weapons exist to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Our medical bays exist to heal whoever needs healing, enemy or friend. We see no contradiction in this. That is because your species is young and idealistic, Thexall said. You've been part of the galactic community for less than a decade. You haven't learned the harsh realities yet. Or maybe, Lisa said quietly, we learned different lessons from our harsh realities. The council chamber fell silent. Some counselors shifted in their seats. The jellyfish counselor's tentacles waved in what might have been thought. Finally, a new voice spoke. It belonged to High Commander Zarkoth of the Caltharian Empire, who was sitting in on the session as a military observer. A question for the humans, Zarkoth said. If you were to encounter an enemy fleet while carrying medical supplies to a disaster zone, what would you do? Jake didn't hesitate. We'd defend ourselves if attacked. We'd try to avoid combat if possible, and after any engagement, we'd render aid to wounded survivors from both sides before continuing to our original destination. Zarkoth made a sound that might have been laughter. Even enemy wounded? Especially enemy wounded, Jake said. Because they're not enemies anymore once they can't fight. They're just people who need help. The Caltharian leaned forward in his seat, his black eyes fixed on the screen. Fascinating. The Caltharian Empire has never considered such an approach. Our warships exist solely for war. The thought of them carrying medical supplies is absurd. Then perhaps your warships are missing half their purpose, Lisa said. Thexall's mandibles clicked rapidly. This council must discuss this matter further. Captain Morrison, you and your vessel will remain in position until we reach a decision. You are not cleared to dock. Understood, Counselor, Jake said, though his tone made it clear The council chambers buzzed with conversation as representatives from various species debated the human situation. Counselor Thexall stood at his platform, mandibles clicking in irritation as he listened to the arguments flowing around him. Some counselors wanted to turn the humans away. Others were curious. A few seemed completely confused by the whole situation. Aboard the Defiant, Jake Morrison sat in his ready room, reviewing old mission reports. He wanted to be prepared for whatever questions the council might throw at him next. The door chimed, and he looked up to see Dr. Helen Price standing in the doorway. "Come in." "Helen," Jake said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. Helen was a woman in her mid-30s with blonde hair pulled back in a tight bun. She'd been with the Defiant since its launch, and Jake trusted her judgment completely. She sat down and folded her hands in her lap. "I heard we're stuck in limbo while the council decides if we're dangerous or not," she said. "That's about right," Jake replied. "They can't wrap their heads around a warship carrying medical supplies." Helen shook her head. "I've been looking at the database entries for some of these species. The Vrexians have dedicated medical ships that are completely unarmed, not even defensive weapons. They rely on other ships to protect them. And the Caltharians? Their warships don't even have proper medical bays. If someone gets hurt in battle, they do basic field treatment and hope they survive until they can get to a hospital ship. It's like they've never considered that a warship might need to heal its own crew, let alone anyone else." Jake leaned back in his chair. "It's a different way of thinking. They separate everything into neat categories. Military is military. Medical is medical. Ever the two shall meet. It seems wasteful," Helen said. "All that power and capability, and they only use it for one thing." "That's what we need to make them understand," Jake said. "But I'm not sure talking is going to do it." Back in the council chambers, Ambassador Lisa Bennett had been given permission to present humanity's case more fully. She stood at a special platform in the center of the circular room, with holographic displays floating around her. "Honorable counselors," Lisa began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "I understand that our approach to military vessels is unusual by galactic standards, but I'd like to show you why we do things this way." She touched a control, and the holographic displays came to life. They showed a planet with green continents and blue oceans. It looked peaceful from space. "This is New Portland, a Terran colony world established 8 years ago. Population of 45,000, mostly agricultural workers and their families. 3 months ago, the planet experienced a magnitude 8 earthquake along its primary fault line. The hologram shifted to show devastation. Buildings collapsed into rubble, fires burning in several districts, people trapped under debris. The colony's infrastructure was severely damaged," Lisa continued. Their hospital collapsed. Power grid was down. Communication with off-world was limited to emergency transmitters. They sent out a distress call to any ship in the area. Thexal clicked his mandibles. "And the nearest medical vessel was how far away?" 6 days at best speed," Lisa said. But the UNS Defiant was conducting patrol exercises 1 day away. Captain Morrison received the distress call and immediately altered course. The hologram changed to show the Defiant dropping into orbit around New Portland. Small shuttles began launching from its bays. Within 2 hours of arrival, the Defiant had deployed its full complement of Marines to assist in search and rescue operations. Our Marines aren't just soldiers. They're trained in disaster response, emergency medicine, and structural assessment. They could tell which buildings were safe to enter and which were too damaged. The hologram showed men and women in military uniforms pulling people from collapsed buildings, carefully moving debris, treating injuries on the spot. At the same time, Lisa continued, Dr. Price and her medical staff established 3 field hospitals using equipment designed for rapid deployment. These facilities were up and running within 3 hours. They could perform surgery, treat critical injuries, and provide ongoing care for hundreds of patients. A new image appeared, showing large medical tents with the UNS insignia on them. Inside, doctors and nurses worked alongside local medical staff. Our engineering teams used military-grade fabricators to manufacture temporary housing, restore power to critical systems, and purify water. Equipment that was designed to build forward operating bases in hostile territory turned out to be perfect for rebuilding a damaged colony. The jellyfish counselor waved her tentacles. This is impressive, Ambassador Bennett, but it does not address the fundamental concern. Your ship carries weapons, significant weapons. Could it not have done all of this work without such armaments? No, Lisa said simply. And I'll explain why. The Defiant's powerful engines, designed for combat maneuvers, allowed it to arrive 5 days before any medical ship. Those 5 days meant the difference between life and death for dozens of colonists trapped in collapsed buildings. Our advanced sensors, built to detect enemy vessels, were used to scan through rubble and locate survivors. Our communication arrays, designed to coordinate fleet actions, managed rescue operations across an entire continent simultaneously. She paused, letting that sink in. Every system on the Defiant serves dual purposes. The weapons fabricators that can make missiles can also make medical equipment. The armor that protects against enemy fire also protects against atmospheric entry at high speeds, getting us to disasters faster. The combat training our Marines receive makes them disciplined, efficient, and capable of working under extreme pressure. Thexal shifted on his platform. You speak of efficiency, yet your approach seems to dilute both military and medical capabilities. A dedicated medical ship could carry more supplies. A dedicated warship could carry more weapons. But neither could respond as quickly or as completely as the Defiant did, Lisa countered. And that's the point. We don't see military and humanitarian as separate things. We see them as two sides of the same purpose, protecting life and helping people. High Commander Zarkoth spoke up from his observer position. Ambassador, I find myself curious about something. The Caltharian Empire prides itself on military strength. Our warriors are trained from childhood. Our ships are instruments of pure war. Yet what you describe suggests that human warriors are expected to be healers as well. How do you reconcile these opposing philosophies? Lisa smiled. Commander, they're not opposing philosophies. They're complementary. A human soldier is someone who has the strength to fight and the wisdom to know when not to. The same discipline that makes someone good in combat also makes them good at saving lives under pressure. The same courage that lets someone charge into battle also lets them run into a burning building to save a stranger. Interesting, Zarkoth said, leaning back in his seat. In Caltharian culture, we have always believed that warriors must focus solely on war. To divide their attention is to weaken their effectiveness. In human culture, Lisa replied, we learned a long time ago that the strongest warrior is the one who fights for something worth protecting. And you can't truly protect something if you don't also know how to heal it, rebuild it, and nurture it. The council chambers grew quiet. Some counselors seemed to be considering her words. Others still looked skeptical. Thexal clicked his mandibles slowly. You paint an appealing picture, Ambassador. But words are easy. Actions are what matter. The question remains, can we trust a heavily armed warship in our humanitarian operations? Can we trust that your weapons will not be used for ulterior purposes? Before Lisa could respond, Amy Carter's voice came through on the emergency channel. Ambassador Bennett, Captain Morrison, we have a situation. A distress call just came through on the priority network. Lisa touched her communicator. What kind of distress call? It's from Paxil 7, a Lumini world about 18 hours from here at military speed. They're reporting a plague outbreak. Fast-moving, highly contagious. Their medical facilities are overwhelmed. Thexal heard this through the Council's monitoring systems. There are 3 medical ships in the humanitarian queue ahead of your vessel, Captain Morrison. The nearest one can reach Paxil 7 in 6 days. Jake's voice came through the channel, calm but firm. 6 days is too long, Counselor. People will die. That is unfortunate, Thexal said, but protocol must be followed. Medical ships handle medical emergencies. Your vessel will wait its turn. There was a pause. Lisa could picture Jake on the bridge weighing his options. She knew what he was going to do before he said it. Counselor Thexal, with respect, I'm breaking from the queue. The Defiant is setting course for Paxil 7. The council chambers erupted in shocked voices. Thexal's mandibles clattered like breaking glass. Captain Morrison, if you violate protocol, there will be severe consequences. Humanity's standing in the Galactic Council will be affected. I understand, Counselor, Jake said. But I took an oath when I became a captain. That oath wasn't to follow protocol. It was to protect and serve those who need help. Right now, the people of Paxil 7 need help, and I can get it to them faster than anyone else. Lisa spoke up. Counselor, I support Captain Morrison's decision. If the Paxil 7 hung in space like a jewel, its surface covered in soft purple vegetation that gave the whole planet a twilight appearance. The Lumini who lived there were peaceful people, their bodies naturally bioluminescent, glowing with soft light that pulsed gently with their emotions. They had achieved space travel only recently and were still new to the wider galaxy. They were also dying. The plague had started in one of the coastal cities 3 weeks ago. At first, it seemed like a simple respiratory infection. But it spread, far faster than anything the Lumini had seen before. Their immune systems couldn't fight it. Their medical facilities, designed for routine care and minor injuries, were completely overwhelmed. Now thousands were sick, and more were falling ill every day. Elder Soren stood in the planetary command center, watching the medical reports scroll across the screens with growing despair. His own glow had dimmed to almost nothing, a sign of extreme stress among his people. When the sensors detected a ship dropping out of faster-than-light travel near the planet, he felt a small surge of hope. "Is it the medical ship?" he asked his assistant. The assistant checked the readings, and her glow flickered with confusion. "Elder, it's a warship, a human warship." Soren's hope dimmed again. What use was a warship against a plague? But then his communication console lit up with an incoming transmission. He accepted it and found himself looking at a human male in a military uniform. "Elder Soren, I'm Captain Jake Morrison of the UNS Defiant. We received your distress call. We're here to help." "Captain, we appreciate your response, but we need medical assistance. We're facing a plague that our facilities cannot handle." "I understand, Elder. That's why we're here. The Defiant is equipped for exactly this kind of emergency. I need your permission to begin landing operations." Soren looked at the screens, showing his dying people. What choice did he have? "Permission granted, Captain. But please, we have very little time." "We'll move fast," Jake promised. Morrison out. On the bridge of the Defiant, Jake turned to his crew. "Greg, coordinate with planetary control. I want landing sites near every major population center. Helen, get your medical teams ready. Lieutenant Victor Hayes, prepare the Marines for deployment." Lieutenant Hayes was a stocky man with a square jaw and the kind of steady presence that made people trust him instantly. He nodded once and headed for the Marine Bay. Within minutes, the Defiant's launch bays opened and dozens of shuttles poured out like seeds from a pod. Each shuttle was packed with personnel, equipment, and supplies. They descended toward the purple planet in precise formation, their military training evident in every movement. The first shuttle touched down in the capital city, where the plague had hit hardest. The rear ramp dropped and Hayes led his Marines out. They wore environmental suits, not because the Lumini atmosphere was dangerous to humans, but to prevent any chance of cross-contamination. Each Marine carried medical supplies along with their usual equipment. The Lumini who watched them arrive were surprised. They'd expected doctors in white coats, not soldiers in tactical gear. But those soldiers moved with purpose and efficiency that was almost beautiful to watch. Hayes surveyed the area quickly. The Lumini had set up emergency shelters in a large plaza, but they were disorganized and overcrowded. Sick people lay on makeshift beds with minimal care. The local medical staff looked exhausted, overwhelmed by the sheer number of patients. "All right," Hayes called to his Marines. "You know the drill. Set up field hospitals according to protocol. Medical personnel get priority access. Let's move." The Marines split into teams with practiced ease. Some began unloading large containers from the shuttles. Others started clearing space and marking zones. Within 30 minutes, they had erected 3 large medical tents, each one equipped with advanced life support systems, surgical equipment, and enough beds for 100 patients. Dr. Helen Price arrived on the second shuttle with her medical staff. She took one look at the situation and started issuing orders. Sort patients by severity. Critical cases go to Tent 1, moderate cases to Tent 2, mild symptoms to Tent 3. Get me samples from various patients. We need to understand this plague's structure before we can fight it. A Lumini doctor approached Helen, his glow flickering with uncertainty. "Doctor, I am Healer Venn. I must confess confusion. You arrived on a warship." Helen smiled as she pulled on surgical gloves. "We get that a lot. Come on, Healer Venn. Show me your sickest patients. Let's see what we're dealing with." By the end of the first day, the Defiant's crew had established field hospitals in 7 cities across Paxil 7. Each site was staffed by a mix of human medical personnel and Marines, all working alongside the local Lumini healers. The Marines handled logistics, crowd control, and the physical labor of building infrastructure. The medical staff focused on treatment and research. Back aboard the Defiant, Chief Engineer Patrick Stone was in the fabrication bay with his team. Patrick was a tall, thin man who looked like a strong wind might blow him over, but his mind was sharp as a laser cutter. Helen needs synthesis equipment that can produce large quantities of antiviral compounds, Patrick said to his team. Our medical fabricators aren't designed for that volume, but our weapons fabricators are. One of his engineers, a young woman named Kelly Wright, looked up from her console. You want to use weapons fabricators to make medicine? Why not? Patrick said. A fabricator is a fabricator. It breaks down raw materials and rebuilds them into whatever we program. Right now we program them to make missiles, but they can make anything if we feed them the right blueprints. That's actually brilliant, Kelly said, already pulling up the fabricator controls. It'll take a few hours to reprogram them and source the right materials, but we can do it. Get it done, Patrick said. People are dying down there. On the planet's surface, Helen was working in the main field hospital, studying samples of the plague under high-powered scanners. The disease was nasty, she had to admit. It attacked the respiratory system aggressively and seemed to mutate slightly in each host, making it harder to develop a single treatment. But Helen had advantages the Lumini didn't have. The Defiant's sensors were designed for military purposes, capable of detecting tiny variations in energy signatures across vast distances. Those same sensors, when turned to medical purposes, could map the plague's genetic structure with incredible precision. She could see exactly how it replicated, exactly where its weak points were. Got you, she muttered, highlighting a specific protein chain. That's your vulnerability. She opened a communication channel to Patrick. Stone, I'm sending you the molecular structure for a broad-spectrum antiviral. It should work on multiple strains of this plague. Can you produce it? Patrick's voice came back immediately. Already reprogramming the fabricators. Give me 4 hours and I'll have your first batch. How much do you need? Enough to treat 10,000 people initially, Helen said. If it works as well as I think it will, we'll need to scale up production fast. Consider it done. By the third day, the transformation was remarkable. The field hospitals were running smoothly, with human and Lumine medical staff working together seamlessly. The Marines had not only set up the medical facilities, but had also repaired damaged infrastructure, restored clean water supplies, and organized distribution networks for food and medicine. Lieutenant Hayes stood in one of the hospital tents, watching a Marine named Chris Baker help a young Lumini child drink water. The child's glow had been almost non-existent 2 days ago. Now it pulsed with a soft, healthy light. You're good with kids, Hayes said to Chris. Chris shrugged. Got 3 of my own back home. Kids are kids, whether they glow or not. Elder Soren visited the main field hospital on the 4th day. His own glow had returned to nearly full strength, a combination of recovering health and renewed hope. He found Helen directing her staff as they administered the new antiviral treatment to a long line of patients. Dr. Price, Soren said, I wanted to thank you personally. When your ship arrived, I confess I didn't understand how a warship could help us. Now I see that I was wrong. Helen looked up from her medical tablet and smiled. A lot of people make that mistake, Elder. They see the guns and the armor and think that's all we are. But every system on the Defiant serves more than one purpose. Your Captain Morrison explained this to the Galactic Council, I understand, Soren said. They did not believe him. No, they didn't, Helen agreed. But maybe seeing what we've done here will change their minds. Soren's glow brightened with conviction. I will make sure they know. The humans brought us a warship, yes, but they used it to wage war against death itself. What higher purpose could any vessel serve? On the 5th day, sensors detected ships arriving in the system. The 3 medical vessels that had been ahead of the Defiant in the humanitarian queue had finally reached Paxil 7. They dropped into orbit and immediately began scanning the planet. Captain Jake Morrison received a communication from the lead medical ship, commanded by a captain from a species that looked like bipedal otters. Captain Morrison, this is Captain Vrel of the medical vessel Mercy's Light. We received word you broke protocol to respond to this emergency. We've arrived to provide assistance, but our sensors show the morning light on Paxil 7 had a unique quality, filtered through the purple vegetation to create soft shadows that seemed to glow from within. In the main field hospital, Dr. Helen Price stood at the entrance and watched as the last of the critical patients were moved to recovery status. The transformation over the past week had been nothing short of miraculous. She walked through the tent, checking on patients and consulting with both her human staff and the Lumini healers. A young Lumini named Shira, whose glow had been nearly extinguished when she'd arrived 5 days ago, now pulsed with healthy light as she sat up in bed and ate solid food for the first time in weeks. "How are you feeling?" Helen asked. Shira's glow brightened, which Helen had learned was the Lumini equivalent of a smile. "Much better, Doctor. When will I be able to go home?" "Tomorrow, if your tests continue to look this good," Helen said, checking the readouts on her medical scanner. "Your immune system has fully adapted to the antiviral treatment. You're going to be fine." "My family thought I would die," Shira said quietly. "The elders said there was no hope. Then your ship arrived." Helen touched the young Lumini's shoulder gently. "We were just in the right place at the right time." "No," Shira said, her glow intensifying with conviction. "You were in the right place because you chose to be. The other ships were coming, but they were too far away. You came because you could, because your ship was fast enough and strong enough. That's what the elders are saying. The humans have ships that are both swords and shields." Helen hadn't heard that phrase before, but she liked it. Swords and shields. Weapons and protection. It captured the Defiant's dual nature perfectly. Across the tent, Lieutenant Victor Hayes was helping his Marines break down some of the temporary structures they'd built. The crisis was passing, and it was time to start transitioning care back to the Lumini's own facilities, which were now reinforced and better equipped thanks to the supplies and equipment the Defiant had provided. Marine Chris Baker approached Hayes, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Sir, the locals are asking if we can show them how to set up rapid response facilities like these. They want to be prepared in case something like this happens again." "Good thinking on their part," Hayes said. "Put together a training team. We've got 2 more days here before we head back to Zenith Prime. Let's use that time to make sure they're ready for whatever comes next." "Yes, sir," Chris said, heading off to organize the training. Hayes looked around at his Marines. They were tired, covered in dust and sweat, but every single one of them looked satisfied. This was what they'd trained for, not just combat, but helping people. The Marine Corps motto wasn't just about fighting, it was about being ready for anything. In orbit, Chief Engineer Patrick Stone was in the fabrication bay, running final diagnostics on the reprogrammed weapons fabricators. They'd produced enough antiviral medication to treat the entire population of Paxil 7 twice over, and he was documenting the process for future reference. Kelly Wright looked up from her console. "Chief, I've been thinking. If we can reprogram the fabricators this quickly for medical production, what else could we make? Emergency shelters? Water purification systems? Food synthesizers?" Patrick nodded slowly. "All of that and more. The fabricators don't care what they're making as long as we give them the right instructions and raw materials. We could theoretically produce anything a colony or disaster zone might need." "That's incredible," Kelly said. "Why don't all warships do this?" "Because most warships don't think like we do," Patrick replied. "They see fabricators as weapons production tools, period. They never consider the other applications. But humans, we've always been good at improvising, at finding new uses for old tools." On the bridge, Captain Jake Morrison was reviewing the final status reports with Commander Greg Palmer. The numbers were impressive. The plague had been completely contained. Infection rates had dropped to near zero. The Lumini medical infrastructure had been reinforced and upgraded, and they'd done it all in less than a week. "The Council is going to have to eat their words," Greg said with satisfaction. "We did exactly what we said we could do." "Maybe," Jake said cautiously. But Counselor Thexall didn't become a senior diplomat by admitting he was wrong easily. He's going to look for reasons to maintain his position. "What more proof does he need?" Greg asked. We saved an entire planet. Some people see what they want to see regardless of evidence, Jake replied. But we did what we came here to do. That's what matters. Amy Carter turned from her communication station. Captain, we're receiving a transmission from Elder Soren. He's asking if you'd be willing to accept a formal ceremony of thanks before we depart. Jake smiled. Tell him we'd be honored. The ceremony took place in the capital city's central plaza, the same place where the first field hospital had been erected. That hospital was now being carefully dismantled, with the Lumini medical staff taking over full care of the remaining patients. Thousands of Lumini gathered in the plaza, their collective glow creating a soft, beautiful light that pulsed in waves. Elder Soren stood on a raised platform with Captain Morrison, Dr. Price, Lieutenant Hayes, and Chief Engineer Stone. The Elder's glow was bright and strong, and his voice carried clearly across the plaza. 7 days ago our world faced destruction, Soren said. A plague we could not fight threatened to extinguish our light forever. We called for help, and help came, though not in the form we expected. When we saw the human warship in our skies, many of us were confused. Some were afraid. What use was a warship against a plague? The crowd's glow dimmed slightly, remembering that fear. But the humans showed us something we had never imagined, Soren continued. They showed us that strength and compassion are not opposites. They showed us that the same ship that carries weapons to defend the innocent can also carry medicine to heal the sick. The same soldiers trained for war can also save lives with equal skill and dedication. The Elder turned to Jake. Captain Morrison, you and your crew waged war against death itself and won. You used your warship's speed to arrive when others could not. You used your military discipline to organize chaos into order. You used your weapons fabricators to create medicine instead of destruction. You have redefined what it means to be warriors. Jake felt uncomfortable with such praise, but he stood straight and accepted it. Elder Soren, we only did what any decent beings would do. You needed help, and we were able to provide it. That's not heroic. That's just basic compassion. Perhaps, Soren said, his glow pulsing with gentle disagreement. But you had the power to help, and you chose to use that power wisely. Many beings have power. Few use it with such wisdom. The Lumini will not forget what the humans did for us. And I promise you, the Galactic Council will hear our testimony. The crowd's glow brightened in agreement, pulsing in rhythmic waves that felt like applause. Jake and his officers accepted the thanks with humility, knowing that they'd done nothing more than their duty. But they also understood that what seemed normal to them was extraordinary to the rest of the galaxy. As the ceremony concluded and the crew prepared to return to their ship, a young Lumini child approached Lieutenant Hayes. Her glow was bright and healthy, and she held something in her small hands. Soldier Hayes, she said in a soft voice, I made this for you. She handed him a small carved crystal that caught the light and refracted it in beautiful patterns. Hayes knelt down to the child's level and accepted the gift carefully. Thank you, he said gently. What's your name? Mira, the child said. You helped save my mother. The healer said she would die, but your doctor made her better. Hayes felt a lump in his throat. I'm glad we could help, Mira. Your mother is very lucky to have a daughter like you. Mira's glow brightened with what might have been a blush. When I grow up, I want to serve on a ship like yours, a ship that helps people. Then study hard and be kind, Hayes said. Those are the most important qualities for any sailor, whether they're on a warship or a medical ship. Back aboard the Defiant, the crew secured from planetary operations and prepared for departure. The ship's systems hummed back to life as they initialized the faster-than-light engines. On the bridge, Jake looked at the beautiful purple planet one last time. Set course for Zenith Prime, he ordered. Let's go face the music. The Defiant accelerated smoothly, breaking orbit and climbing away from Paxil 7. Behind them, thousands of Lumini watched from the ground, their collective glow visible from space like a sea of gentle stars. The journey back to Zenith Prime took 2 days. During that time, the crew rested, reviewed their actions, and prepared reports on everything they'd accomplished. The medical staff documented the plague's structure and their treatment protocols. The Marines wrote after-action reports on their disaster response procedures. The engineers compiled data on fabricator reprogramming and rapid infrastructure deployment. Helen stopped by the bridge during the second day to talk to Jake. I've been going over the numbers. We treated 12,000 patients directly. We distributed preventive medication to another 30,000. We trained 200 local medical personnel in advanced treatment techniques. And we did it all in 6 days. Not bad for a warship, Jake said with a slight smile. The council chambers were packed. Every seat was filled and additional observers stood along the walls. It wasn't every day that the Galactic Council held a special session, and word had spread quickly about the human warship that had broken protocol to save a planet. Species from across the galaxy wanted to see how the council would respond. Captain Jake Morrison stood at the central platform with Ambassador Lisa Bennett beside him. Elder Soren of the Lumini stood nearby, his glow steady and bright. The circular arrangement of council platforms surrounded them, and at the highest platform, Councillor Thexal presided over the session. This council is now in session, Thexal announced, his mandibles clicking formally. We are here to address the actions of Captain Jake Morrison and the human warship UNS Defiant, which violated established protocol by breaking from the humanitarian queue without authorization to respond to an emergency at Paxil 7. Jake stood straight, his hands clasped behind his back in a military rest position. He'd been prepared for censure, possibly even sanctions against humanity. Breaking protocol was a serious offense in galactic society. Before we hear from Captain Morrison, Thexal continued, we will hear testimony from Elder Soren of the Lumini people, who were the recipients of the unauthorized assistance. Elder Soren stepped forward, and his glow brightened until it filled the chamber with soft light. When he spoke, his voice was clear and strong. Honored counselors, I come before you not to defend the humans, but to thank them. 7 days ago, my people faced extinction. A plague ravaged our world and our medical facilities could not stop it. We sent a distress call, and the galactic community responded. 3 medical ships were dispatched to help us. Soren paused, letting his words settle. Those ships would have arrived 6 days after we sent our call for help. 6 days during which thousands more of my people would have died. 6 days during which the plague would have spread unchecked. 6 days during which hope faded with each passing hour. His glow pulsed with remembered fear. Then the humans arrived. Not in 6 days, but in 18 hours. They came in a warship because that warship had the speed to reach us when others could not. And when they arrived, they brought not just weapons, but healing. Not just soldiers, but saviors. Soren turned to look directly at Thexal. Counselor, you speak of protocol. My people speak of survival. The humans violated your protocol, yes. But in doing so, they saved my entire species. If following protocol means watching civilizations die while waiting for proper authorization, then perhaps your protocol needs to change. A murmur ran through the chamber. Several counselors shifted uncomfortably. The jellyfish counselor's tentacles waved in what might have been agreement. Thexal's mandibles clicked rapidly. Elder Soren, this council understands your gratitude. However, the rules exist for important reasons. If every species breaks protocol whenever they feel justified, chaos will result. Respectfully, Counselor, Soren said, his glow intensifying. The only chaos I witnessed was the chaos of disease destroying my world. The humans brought order. They brought hope. They brought life. If that is the result of breaking protocol, then I say break it more often. High Commander Zarkoth stood from his observer position, drawing all eyes to him. The Caltharian warrior moved to the center floor, his bronze scales gleaming under the chamber lights. Counselors, I ask permission to speak, Zarkoth said. Thexal clicked his mandibles in irritation but nodded. The commander may speak. I have spent the past week reviewing every detail of the human operation at Paxil 7, Zarkoth said. I have studied their tactics, their equipment deployment, their medical protocols, and their results. As a military commander, I am trained to recognize efficiency and effectiveness. What the humans accomplished was both. He turned to face Jake. Captain Morrison, I have commanded warships for 30 cycles. I have fought in 17 major engagements. I know the capabilities of military vessels. Yet I confess, I never imagined using those capabilities the way you did. We see our warships differently than most species, Jake said simply. Indeed, Zarkoth agreed. The Caltharian Empire has always believed that military vessels should be pure instruments of war. To dilute their purpose with humanitarian concerns would weaken their effectiveness. But what I witnessed at Paxil 7 has challenged that belief. Zarkoth turned back to address the council. The humans used military-grade sensors to map a plague's genetic structure. They used weapons fabricators to produce medicine. They used combat-trained soldiers to coordinate disaster relief. They used every capability of a warship not to destroy life but to preserve it. And they did so with an efficiency that 3 dedicated medical ships could not match. The results are not in question, Thexal said. The violation of protocol is. Then let me be clear about where the Caltharian Empire stands, Zarkoth said, his voice carrying weight and authority. We have decided to retrofit our warships with medical capabilities based on the human model. We are beginning immediate consultations with human engineers and medical personnel to learn their methods. If this council chooses to sanction humanity for their actions at Paxil 7, the Caltharian Empire will stand with the humans. The chamber erupted in surprised voices. The Caltharians were one of the oldest and most respected military powers in the galaxy. Their support of the human approach was significant. Thexal's mandibles clattered like falling stones. Commander Zarkoth, you cannot be serious. You would abandon centuries of military tradition? I would evolve our tradition, Zarkoth corrected. Captain Morrison said something to me during our first conversation that I have not forgotten. He said the strongest warrior is the one who knows when not to fight. The Caltharian Empire has always known how to wage war. Perhaps it is time we also learned how to wage peace. The jellyfish counselor spoke up, her musical voice filling the chamber. I move that we hear from other species present. It appears the human actions have resonated beyond just the Luminae and Caltharians. Thexal looked like he wanted to object, but he could not deny the motion. Very well. Are there others who wish to speak? A representative from the Torvan Consortium, a species of crystalline beings, rose from their platform. The Torvan Consortium has also reviewed the human operation. We find their approach to be remarkably efficient. We are exploring similar modifications to our own vessels. Another voice, this time from a species that resembled 6-legged cats. The Felinari Alliance wishes to enter discussions with humanity about training programs for dual-purpose vessel operations. More voices joined in. One after another, species that had watched the events at Paxil 7 expressed interest in learning from the human approach. The tide in the chamber was shifting, and even Thexal could see it. Finally, the Vrexian counselor raised a claw for silence. It appears this council has heard enough testimony. The question before us is clear. Did Captain Morrison and the UNS Defiant violate protocol? Yes. But we must also ask a second question. Did those violations result in a greater good that outweighs the breach? Thexal looked around the chamber, seeing the faces of dozens of species all watching him. He was a proud being, but he was not a fool. He could see that humanity had done something remarkable, something that was changing the way the galaxy thought about military vessels. Captain Morrison, Thexal said slowly, you have placed this council in a difficult position. We cannot simply ignore protocol violations or chaos would result. However, we also cannot ignore the fact that your actions saved an entire civilization. Jake stood still, waiting. He'd accept whatever judgment came. He'd do the same thing again if faced with the same choice. Therefore, Thexal continued, this council has decided on the following actions. First, you will receive a formal reprimand for breaking from the queue without authorization. This reprimand will be placed in your service record. Jake nodded. He could live with that. Second, Thexal said, and his tone shifted slightly, you and your crew will receive the Galactic Medal of Humanitarian Service for your actions at Paxil 7. This is the highest honor this council can bestow for civilian life-saving operations. A murmur of approval ran through the chamber. Jake felt Lisa touch his arm gently, a gesture of congratulation. Third, Thexol continued. This council recognizes that the current system of vessel classification may be inadequate for the modern galactic community. We are establishing a new category called dual capability vessels. Any ship that can demonstrate both defensive capabilities and significant humanitarian resources may register under this classification. Such vessels may queue based on mission purpose rather than vessel type. The chamber broke into applause from various species, each showing approval in their own way. The Lumini glowed brighter. The Caltharians struck their chest plates. The crystalline Torvans chimed like bells. Finally, Thexol said, raising his voice over the noise, this council requests that humanity provide training and consultation to any species that wishes to learn their approach to dual capability vessel operations. Captain Morrison, Ambassador Bennett, your species has shown us a new way of thinking about strength and purpose. The galaxy is better for it. Jake felt something he hadn't expected, a sense of pride not just in,